before we end up moving on to our routes here, I want to show you one other association that could end up coming up. And again, I probably am not going to use this in this example, but let's just say that we had a situation where a user could be managed by another user. This is a little bit different because we're talking about a foreign key that's going to be within the same table. And we could set up our association in a similar way. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to say a user belongs to user. Now, if I just did that, it's fine. This will still end up running. And if I went over here, in fact, I could even see that I see this user ID showing up here. And if I go and I end up describing users, I'll see a user has another user ID. From a database perspective, this is kind of difficult because what I'm getting at here is this user is going to be managed by somebody. So the way to look here, I think aliasing makes a lot of sense to go over here and say, yeah, a user belongs to another user, right? And we could go over here and we could say as manager, right? So user belongs to another user, but this user that they belong to, we're going to end up calling them a manager, and this even reads a little bit better because we could see that a user ends up having a manager. And so what we could end up doing here is that we could also go in the other direction as well. Let's say that we had a user and we wanted to find out all the persons that they end up managing. What we could do is we could say a user has many user. But again, this is going to put us in the same boat that we were before. Once you end up using that alias, again, now we've got these two IDs here. This doesn't make sense. We end up finding who you manage by looking at where you show up, as a manager. So if we have some ID of a user and we want to find out the people that they end up managing, we would end up querying and we would look for where that ID is as a manager ID. So here, same thing. And we could do an alias in the other direction as well. We could say this is going to be as manages, okay? But we also, more important than that is to go over here and say, hey, look, the foreign key that we're going to look for to find out who you end up managing, we're going to find that by looking at the manager ID. So here we have this association, which will become handy when we end up, looking at how we can end up using includes. Let's just do one other thing here, just so we could see that we have this data. Let's actually we're looking at Mo, so we could go over here and say, hey Mo, your manager ID is going to be Larry. Your manager ID is going to be Larry, and let's do an await, and we'll say, Mo, we would like to save you. So we could end up doing that. That's going to be asynchronous. When we end up looking at this, we'll see that we end up updating our values, and we'll see that Mo has a manager ID. So again, this is just one or the other, one thing that we just hadn't seen before, where you could actually have a foreign key on the same table. And this is not all that uncommon. We could think about other situations where, that might end up being the case, where you're going to have some sort of self-referencing column. And that's usually when you have some kind of hierarchy that you're trying to capture.